All right, team, welcome back. So we're going to pick up where we left off, okay? And we're going to wire up two things. We're going to start working on our service layer, and we're going to start then we're going to start working on our controller layer. So for this, we're going to create two additional packages. The first package is going to be named services, and then the next package is going to be named web, which is where we're going to put our controllers. Okay, so why are we going to create a service layer? I really want to be clear on this, and I'll explain why. Just let me type this out. So we're going to create a class called project service, and we're going to annotate it at service. And then we're going to auto-wire the project repository. Hold on, I know that I have to explain this, sorry, but I do want to wire this up so I can explain the reason. So I know that since some of you already have some experience with the Spring framework, I know that you have seen people that just put or auto-wire the repository straight into the controller. And I know that for very simple scenarios or for very simple examples, that might be for a game. However, what that usually does, and the problem that you usually get into whenever you do this, is that then you end up putting way too much logic in the controller. And I have seen this many times, and that's, in my opinion, not a good practice. You always want to have your logic abstracted from the controller as much as you can, obviously. And then you only pretty much just want the controller to be a router rather than a place that holds your logic. So this is why I want to always use a services layer that talks to the repository rather than having a bunch of logic on the controller layer. Okay, so now let's go back to our service, and now that we have our service, again, the next step is to give it the service annotation and then inject the project repository here so that we can have access to those out-of-the-box functionalities that I showed you that allows us to interface with the backend. The first thing that we're going to enable from the CRUD operations is we're going to enable we're going to enable the application to actually save a project. All right, so that's basically the first method that we're going to create. So for this, we're just going to put a public project, so returns a project object, and we're going to name it save or update project. And then this, for now, is going to take a project object, and then all it's going to do for now is that it's going to return project repository.save, which is out of the box from the CRUD repository, and it's going to save the project object that we're going to pass in. And this is all we're going to do here for now. Now, once we start adding users and we start adding backlog items and whatnot, there's going to be a lot of logic here. Okay, there's going to be logic such as making sure that especially for the update operation, which is going to be really interesting, by the way, you're going to see a lot of logic to determine whether or not on the update, the user updating is the owner of the project and so forth. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. But for now, this is all we're going to do. We're just going to pass in a simple project object, and then we're going to persist it on the database. Now we're going to go to the web layer, and we're going to start wiring up our controller, which is pretty much our API, the API that we're going to start hitting so that we can CRUD some projects. And on the controller layer, the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to annotate this as a REST controller. Then the second thing that we're going to do is that we're going to use the request mapping annotation, and we're going to name this, we're going to give it a route of API/project. Okay, cool. So as I mentioned before, the first thing that we want to enable is for us to create a new project. So for this, we're going to bring our project service. We're going to inject our project service onto our controller. Project service, perfect. Then we're going to create the route for us to actually post a new project or create a new project. So for this, we're going to use @post mapping, the @post mapping annotation. Okay, and then this post mapping annotation is going to return a response entity of type project. Now, response entity is a type that allows us to actually have more control on our JSON responses. Remember, we're actually wiring up an API that then we're gonna actually set up with React. And usually we want to, and here we obviously want to have a server or backend that returns JSON responses. A response entity, the type response entity, allows us to control their response statuses and also the JSON objects that we're going to pass on to the client. Okay, so for now we're going to return a response entity of type project, and we're going to name this method create new project. Okay, and for now this is going to take a request body, okay, of type project. Now, what this is going to do, and right now we're just doing the happy path. Okay, there's going to be validation and all sorts of things, but for now we're just doing the happy path. So here we're going to return a new response entity of type project. Then we're going to put the project here that we are creating, and then as I mentioned, here we have the option of actually declare the HTTP status response that we want to set up. So in this case, I'm just going to go with the 201, which is created. And believe it or not, here at this point, we should be enabled to start actually using our API and creating a project object. Okay, so I'm just going to restart the server. So this will take, so the changes will take. Now, I did forget to keep working on the validation here, and I think I mentioned it in the previous video, but don't worry, because once we start testing things out, we're going to start setting up the validation for the project object. Okay, so the next thing that I want you folks to do is that if you haven't done so already, I want you to stop the video and go in and install Postman. Okay, so Postman is a really good tool for API testing, and I am just going to show you here. Give me just a second. And it's basically this tool here, and I'm just gonna do a quick Google search. Postman, and you can basically get it from this site right here, Get Postman. At least at the time of this recording, it is a free tool, and it's what I'm using right now. So what we're gonna do is that as we start wiring our API, we're gonna start using Postman to actually test our API and make sure that our API is good enough before we start hooking it up with our React front end. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do in Postman is I'm going to create a collection, and I'm going to call it ppm tool. Okay, so a collection is pretty much just that, a collection of requests that we know that we're going to be using often, And what we do there is pretty much save them so that we can reuse them. That way we don't have to create them from scratch like I'm about to do right now. Okay, so HTTP localhost 8080. So basically this is going to be our endpoint, and it's going to be API/project. Okay, so basically right now we are going to send a request body that contains a project object, and we're going to send it out to this endpoint right here, and that's going to hit this method here, and it's going to persist the project object that we're sending. Now what I'm going to do here, and just I don't want to leave anything to chance in this demonstration, is that we're going to pass it just a few elements. And so you come here to body, and then you go to raw, and then you go to application.json. Now be really careful here. It has happened to me in the past that I was just trying to send a JSON, a request body, and it wouldn't go. Back when I was a noob, I always forgot to make sure that I was sending send it in JSON format. So for JSON format, you need curly braces, and then you need your attributes surrounded in double quotes. Okay, and then we're gonna do the project name, colon, double quotes, and test. Then we're gonna do project identifier, ID test, doesn't really matter, and then description. A new project. Okay, and now when we send this should actually hit the endpoint, and should persist this project to the database. And let's see, and not only it persists the project to the database, but also brings back 201 created, which is exactly what we set up in our controller. 201 created, this is good. And then it's also giving us a JSON response with a new project object that we have just created. All right, and then the next thing that we want to do is we want to check our database, and we want to make sure that our project object is in fact there. All right, so we're going to come here, and we're going to click on project, run, and oops, not sure what's wrong here, but let me just take a look and see what might have gone wrong here, because actually it did not persist. Oh, my mistake. So what it did here is that it still passed the project object to the response entity, but we never actually used the project service to actually save our project to the database. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you with some more experience were like, hey dude, what are you doing? You need to wire this up. My apologies. It is late at night, and sorry for the background noise. Right now the train is going by. I'm actually recording this from Ontario, Canada, and I live in the beautiful countryside, but I also have a train tracks close enough to the house, and this is why, right? So apologies for the background noise there. And now we can go ahead and try this again. And now we actually get an ID. I'm sure you saw that. If you didn't see that, go ahead and check that out on this video. Just backtrack and you'll see that before we didn't have an ID, and now we should have this persisted on the database. We're gonna create the query from here, and there you have it. Okay, so our backend is looking good. Our API is looking good. In the next video, we're going to start talking about validation, and also how to handle some of the errors that we're going to start getting if we try and pass an invalid project object. Because right now I could very well pass an empty object, and it's just going to give me an ID. It's going to set up space in the database, but it's all going to be null, and this is not good, obviously. All right, So I'll get back to you once the train is done passing through a neighborhood. All right, see you later.